Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. We just wrapped up the earlier portion of our Community Connections presentations, and now we are ready to get cooking. We have a very, very exciting class for you today, but we'll start off with some introductions. So my name is Jeremy Capone. I am the wellness chef, and I am joined by
Daniela Fiorini, and I'm a registered dietitian at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. And I also have the pleasure of co-hosting the nutrition and culinary demonstrations with our exceptional chef, Jeremy Capone. And today we're really excited because the recipes that Jeremy's created for us today align with the Mediterranean diet. So we're going to focus on some of the key points of eating the Mediterranean way. And the three recipes that we'll be featuring today are the brothy bean and green soups, oven roasted trout with creamy lemon farro, and the orange feta salad. And just before we get started, I just want to say that we know that when you have cancer and undergoing treatment, it changes how your body works, how you eat, even how you feel about food. So there are some foods and nutrients that we talk about today that you may not be able to eat right now. And we will provide some ingredient options. And if you're unsure of introducing one of the foods in your diet right now and you're on a special diet, make sure you speak with your healthcare team. But without further ado, unless Jeremy has anything else to say, we'll get right into the recipes. Okay, so our first recipe, brothy beans and greens soup. So eating the Mediterranean way means eating a lot of plant foods. And this is similar to the guidelines for cancer prevention that promotes a plant-based way of eating. This recipe combines the protein and fiber goodness of the cannellini beans, which is a plant protein, which is also a legume, with the spring greens that are packed with health protective compounds that we refer to as phytonutrients. So basically it's a fancy name for nutrients in plants. And basing your diet on whole plant foods also is in keeping with the principles of the anti-inflammatory diet. So we know a lot of people are interested in trying to reduce their chronic inflammation and are interested in anti-inflammatory foods. So eating the Mediterranean way is a simple way of getting into that and also still meeting the guidelines for cancer prevention. On to you, Jeremy.
Fantastic. Yes, we're super excited to be highlighting some recipes that feature some of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. And to get started, like Daniela mentioned, we're going to be doing a very simple bean-based recipe. We love cooking with beans, and we're going to be making really nice brothy beans with some delicious spring ingredients. So we're going to highlight some of spring as well. So to get started, it's all about beans. Let's talk about beans. Now, to make it super simple, yes, absolutely, you can use canned beans, drained, rinsed, and continue on with the recipe, and it really doesn't take too much time from there. If you did want to go the extra step, I thought, you know what, this would be a good opportunity to highlight how to prep beans from the dried state, right, from its dried state. I mean, I remember growing up with, and Danielle, I'm sure it was the same for you, either my grandmother's kitchen or in my mom's kitchen, you know, seeing either a big bowl of beans being soaked in the fridge. Yep. And yep. I was never usually excited when I saw that, but I think that's changed since, and I do enjoy beans quite a bit now. So we're going to talk a little bit about that process. I'm going from the dried bean here, right? And now this is pretty much the same process. Doesn't matter what dried bean you're using, right? We are using cannellini beans, which are like those smaller little white beans. You can use, you know, red kidney beans. You can use chickpeas. Same process. Romano beans. Same process for all those dried beans. So the first thing I actually like to do is we do a quick little sort of the beans. And so let me get a plate here. You can do this in a pan too. And this is just because, I mean, beans come from a field, right? These are plants. They, you know, they're picked and harvested, and sometimes you do find some other stones or twigs kind of in there. It's not usually the case, but it's always a good idea to kind of sort through them. And so what I've done here is, you know, take the amount of beans that you're going to use, shake them flat on a plate or a pan, and this way you can kind of sort through to see if there's any particles that shouldn't be in there. These are pretty good. I probably did sort these ahead of time, but sometimes you might find a little pebble or like a little twig or a little stick, so you can just take that out. The next step would be to get your soaking process going. So you can give them a quick rinse and then put them into either a big bowl or a container. For this, I mean, for today's lesson, I'm not using a ton of beans, so I use the smaller container, but just anticipate that they are going to expand. And so you want to make sure that you leave enough room. So, you know, depending on the bean, they might double in terms of the volume and the expansion. So just, again, make sure that you account for that space. And put them into the refrigerator. So I like to keep them in the refrigerator, just slightly covered. So I don't like to cover them completely. And then you can let them soak in there. Sometimes I'll put a bay leaf inside. Daniela, again, I'll refer to you. I don't know if you've heard about this technique. I know it could be just sort of a urban kitchen tale where it's supposed to lessen the gassy properties of the. I don't know if it's true or not, but I do it more out of habit now.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that, but I do know it's bay leaf is traditional in our family as well, to have that with the lentils. I remember we always did it with the lentils.
Yeah. So we'll chalk it up to flavor at the very least. Awesome. So, and then that's it. Soak it overnight. You'll see it expand. And then what I like to do is drain that water, drain that soaking water, and then you're going to start cooking with fresh cold water. Okay, so you're going to put it into your pan, and around the kitchen here, camera. You're going to be putting it into your pan, cover it with some cold water, and then cook that until tender. Depending on the bean, it's going to take it'll adjust in time. With the cannellini beans, I say about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I mean, it's not a very quick process, but again, it's pretty simple, and we call it like non-active cooking. Bring it to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, lid off, and just let it sort of simmer away until it's nice and tender. Now, I don't like to add a ton of water. What I will do is I will cover it with water just until it's probably about an inch above, and then I'll top up as I need, because this sort of cooking liquid is going to be part of the broth. It's going to be part of that final dish. It's going to have just so much flavor from cooking the beans. And I don't want to dilute that. So I'm just going to always have it about an inch above with water, and I'll top up every once in a while as that cooks down. The only other part of this recipe is here's an opportunity to add some aromatics. Okay, so this is where you're going to add some more flavor to this dish because it's pretty much just beans and water at this point. So what can we add? We can add some. I'm getting blinded out by the light here.
Yeah.
Let's see. There we go. It's a little bit better. So you can add some carrots. You can add some celery, some garlic cloves, even half an onion. And again, you don't have to be fancy with this. These are just aromatics. They're going to provide the flavor to the broth. So just kind of wash them and then keep them in their whole state. One little thing I like to add, usually when I'm cooking beans or even sometimes with soups, is if you have the ends of the Parmesan rind, if you have Parmesan cheese, don't throw those out. I never throw those out. Keep them in a Ziploc bag, keep them in the refrigerator. And they get a little hard and they're hard to grate at this point. But what you can do is when you're ready to use it, just peel the outside, which I've done here, but you can kind of peel the outside of it or even scrape that rind a little bit. And then this is going to go right into that cooking broth. This is going to add a ton of flavor, especially in that sort of umami we've probably mentioned umami before. I'm actually pretty certain we've mentioned umami before, but it's that savoriness, really, really full flavor that it's going to add to this cooking. So adding some of those aromatics, I'll show you what we have here. We cooked it just until the point where it's nice and tender. And you can test that as you go by just taking, one of the beans out, and you can even just, crush it to see if it's nice and soft. These are nice and fluffy almost at this point, so I know that they're ready to go. Now, Danielle, I'll throw it to you as well.
Sure.
If you wanted it to become, I guess, a little bit easier to digest, you just cook it longer.
Cook it longer, yeah. So going back to the soaking, so that was the first way to cut back on the gassiness. Sorry, I was getting some feedback that I think it's better now. So yeah, so the first step you had about soaking the dried beans and then discarding that water. That was the key point in getting rid of the indigestible carbohydrate, a lot of it. And then now the second part is the more you cook it, the more it breaks down the remaining carbohydrate. So it will make it easier to digest. And then if you need to be able to digest it even better, if you needed to, you would puree it. But cooking it for a long time is a good way.
Okay, perfect.
The other thing, Jeremy, I think you've been in my fridge because I have a bunch of rinds from the Parmesan that I just can't bring myself to throw out. And so now I know what to do with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a nice little trick. Don't throw it out there. Again, it's not the cheapest ingredient too. Try to use as much as you can, but adding it to like a soup as it simmers away, or adding it to like a stock or like something like this, it's just gonna add this really, really nice depth of flavor. And so it's a great way to use up that product. I'll mention as well, as it's simmering, especially if you have some of the aromatics in there, you might notice like a kind of like a foam or like some bubbling at the top. Same principle, like if you're making a stock. What I'll do is like every once in a while, I'll just skim that off and just put that into a bowl. It's not the worst thing in the world. It depends on some of the vegetables. It might have a slight bitter component, but even it's more just the clarity of the stock. So this is more of just a habit from culinary school, kind of skimming the top so that you have like a much cleaner, clear looking broth or stock or base, soup base. Okay, so that's pretty much it to make the beans. At this point, you can enjoy them as is, add them to a soup, add them to a nice salad. They're cooked, they're ready to go. You can even freeze those cooked beans, portion them or put them in a freezer bag and freeze them, and they're done. So next time you want to make a really nice soup or make a really nice sort of bean hummus, like you can make a nice cannellini bean hummus, or if you're doing chickpeas, you can do a nice little hummus with that. You have the cooked beans ready to go, and they don't really require much work. And on top of that, even just from like a budget point of view, canned beans they're pretty inexpensive, but even further so, like a bag of dried beans probably costs you maybe like a can and a half or 2 cans worth. But
so yes, as Jeremy was saying, it's pretty cheap to go with the dried beans instead of the canned beans, but both are good to have.
Thanks, Danielle, for jumping in. I realized I lost my connection. Hopefully I'm back. Good to go.
You're back.
Okay, so we're going to finish this dish. And I'm going to add some spring greens. We call it brothy beans with spring greens. It was a long, extended, cold, wintry, whatever you want to call it, but we're back into the nice warm weather now, and so now you can probably start to see some more of those spring ingredients, maybe asparagus, those green onions, and then some of those young those young greens or those early greens. So some of my favorites we're going to add to this, and I add it at the end. This is when I'm going to add it because I don't want to overcook it or even like really destroy the color, like the beautiful green color of the green. So I'm gonna add it right at the end. And you can add any greens. You can add spinach, watercress, kale, I have some beautiful chard here, washed, ready to go. So I'm going to add some of this. And then one of my favorites, I will say our favorites, because I know Daniela has a special spot for dandelions as well.
Yeah.
Dandelions.
Want me to tell my story about my mom?
Yes,
growing up, springtime, my mom was known in the neighborhood for going around and cleaning everybody else's yard because she'd go pick all the dandelion leaves, and lo and behold, that's what we'd have for dinner throughout June, probably throughout June. Yeah.
Yes. So I'd probably suggest buy your dandelions now because I'm seeing more and more dogs being walked around the neighborhood. There'll never be a nice surprise to have some wild dandelion, but it is the same thing, right? This is the greens from that infamous yellow weed that we see. But the greens have this really, really nice slight bitterness to it. I enjoy it. If you don't like the bitterness, you can blanch it. You can sort of boil it out a little bit, and that bitterness will come down quite a bit. But I'm going to add it as is and just sort of roughly chopped. And we're going to throw it in. And again, any greens will work here. It's going to add a ton of flavor. You can even throw in some asparagus. Like, again, now's the time to buy some of these local spring ingredients.
And the dandelion leaves, maybe because it's partial to my growing up, but it actually has a lot of properties that fit with the anti-inflammatory way of eating because it's high in vitamin A and C and iron. And those nutrients are very important for looking at improving our immune system, which then counteracts the inflammation.
Yeah, love that tip. We have a few people watching. I'll throw maybe to our group here. Has anyone enjoyed dandelions before or has a similar story to Daniela where you remember either yourselves or
were you the neighbor? Were you my neighbor?
Someone, yeah, was picking your dandelions. We'll see if anyone has a similar experience. So greens in just until wilted. And I'm also going to add a nice glug of olive oil to this.
A key part of eating the Mediterranean way is olive oil. And it also has anti-inflammatory properties. And from our cancer prevention perspective, it's one of the healthier fats as well.
Love that. So it's gonna add a nice bit of flavor. I also added a little pinch of salt, but I'm adding it at the end. Again, this is another sort of habit with cooking. And I don't know if it's, I looked at this to see what other people have found, but I've always learned that if you add salt too early in the cooking process of dried lentils or dried beans, it really toughens the skin on the outside. And so it's always recommended to season at the end. I just always have done it. I've never experienced it myself, so I don't know if that's absolutely true, but again, just out of habit, I will just add the salt at the end because you don't want that tough skin. And that's it. So we're going to plate. This is a really hearty, but it's light. It's hearty, but it's light. With the beans, I'm gonna plate it so we have some of the beans, we have some of the greens, and again that broth, even with that little bit of parm in it, it's gonna be just super flavorful. It's gonna have this almost this really nice viscosity to it as well because of the starch coming off of the beans.
Now the beans, if you want to compare it to like an egg or an ounce of meat, a half a cup of the cannellini beans actually provides about 8.5 grams of protein. An ounce of meat is 7 and an egg is 6. So you're getting some really good plant protein here. And then, trying to up our fiber, we want to try to get up to 25 grams a day at least. A half a cup provides about 6 grams of fiber. So in that bowl, Jeremy, do you think that's like a quarter cup of beans that you might have or less?
I would say about half a cup. There's probably about half
About
a cup.
half a cup?
Yeah.
Okay, so 8 grams of protein and 6 grams of fiber right there.
Lovely. And I just grated a little bit of sharp cheese on top and a little bit of black pepper just to finish it off. But there we have our really nice brothy cannellini beans with some spring